Welcome to The Greatest Footage Ever Found, an investigative documentary series exploring the mysterious disappearance of movie podcasters David Scandura and Justice Burkett. I'm your host, Charlie Anwar. As my investigation drifted into the paranormal, I decided to interview one final past The Greatest Movie Ever Made guest. I sat down with Audrey Young, who appeared on the show to discuss the film The Craft. As a fan of this cult classic movie about witchcraft, would Audrey's knowledge about dark magic provide any insight into the mysterious events uncovered on the final recordings of The Greatest Movie Ever Made?
No, I have no idea what happened to them. They had me on the show in March to talk about The Craft, and everything seemed normal. I mean, Justice talked over me a lot, and I thought, oh, kind of funny to have a woman on your podcast to talk about a female empowerment movie during a Women's History Month and then barely let her speak. But typical, you know? And then, of course, David had the nerve to say that The Craft wasn't the greatest movie ever made. Like, really? You couldn't even give me that? Right, okay. But yeah, no, I wouldn't say I noticed anything strange. Do I know anything about witchcraft? What? Why would you ask me that? Just because I like a movie about witches? I'm not a witch. And even if I was, do I seem like the kind of person who would put a curse on David and Justice just because I was annoyed at how I was treated on their show? Would I summon a dark spirit to get revenge on them and specifically instructed to leave the podmaster alone because I'm her biggest fan? Just, hypothetically, does that seem like something I would do? Even if I knew how? No, absolutely not.
While Audrey's answers seemed suspicious and very specific, I still needed to listen to the final recording one last time to put all the pieces together.
I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justice Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is the Blair Witch Project the greatest movie ever made?
I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them.
Justice.
Yeah?
I'm so fucking scared right now.
It's fine, David. Just do the intro. We just have one more episode.
I listened to last week's episode, and I think something really, really scary is going on here.
I don't disagree, but we literally only have one more episode of the theme month, and I feel like we just got to get through it. We'll put it behind us. These episodes haven't been performing particularly well, but it's very important to me that we see it through to the end.
Justice, something's after us.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on, but something's out to get us.
It seems like it might just be George Lucas fucking with us, considering so much of it has been Watto themed. I did again go back to the audio and reverse some of the ghostly noises. One of them definitely said blue milk, so I'm almost positive that George Lucas has something to do with this, and that guy doesn't have he's a goofball. He doesn't have a harmful bone in his body, though. I think we're fine. We just gotta forge ahead. We just gotta see this through the end, David.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
We'll
I need
try.
you with me on this, though.
We'll try.
I can't podcast alone, man.
I don't know. I'll try, but I think we should probably wrap this up as soon as we can, and then just get out of here. Just find our way out of the pod studio.
All right.
Because something really, really fucking spooky is going on here.
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying that, of course, the lights are flickering, and there is an ominous whooshing sound that is palpable in the background, and it definitely seems like there is a ominous energy in here. So I'm in agreement with you. We'll just get through it. We'll just talk about the Blair Witch Project. We'll just talk about the Blair Witch Project, and then we'll put all of this behind us. And
okay.
I'm sure whatever this is just going to end after this episode. I think maybe just the spirit world got really into the theme month that I put together here, and maybe we just got some ghost fans, I think is the way to frame this. You know? Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm David Scandura.
Mm-hmm.
This is the greatest movie ever made the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
You're doing great.
I'm joined as always by my co-host Justice Burkett.
Yeah, that's me. I'm way less scared than David is.
And we're talking about the Blair Witch Project today.
Yes,
because we're closing off found footage.
Yes.
Shaky Cam Summer Camp.
Shaky Cam Summer Camp. You almost said the Podmaster's fake name for my theme month, which she has been trying to get me to use on air, Found Footage Filai, which she thinks is much funnier than Shaky Cam Summer Camp. I don't necessarily disagree. I think Found Footage Filai is maybe better. But it's too late now. We're in the last week of it, so... It's Shaky Cam Summer Camp. This is the finale, the grand finale of my theme month, Shaky Cam Summer Camp, which I am dragging David through, kicking and screaming here at the end, and possibly putting his life and very soul at risk. But I'm doing it in the name of art.
Yeah, at the very least, I had the chance to revisit one of the foundational found footage films, one of the most important found footage films, and one of the best found footage films, which is the Blair Witch Project.
Yes. I think that it is not a divisive opinion to say this is pretty much most people's number one greatest found footage movie ever made, more or less. I think it generally occupies the top spot on most people's lists, people who have only dabbled in the genre, and diehards like me. Like, a lot of people think this movie is exemplary of the genre, and, you know, no spoilers for my verdict, but I do feel that way about this movie. So, by the way, any ghostly whisperings or demonic chanting in Latin or anything like that on this episode, I'm just going to refuse to acknowledge. I think if we don't feed into the energy, maybe it'll leave us alone. So we're just going to forge ahead. I'm just pretending like I don't hear it.
Maybe you're right. I don't know. I feel like I'm too scared to continue the podcast, and I'm also too scared to stop the podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what to do.
You just gotta be brave, David, because we're doing it again for the art. just think of the finished product of 4 weeks of Shaky Cam Summer Camp, and what a monumental accomplishment in podcasting that will represent. That's what we're doing it for.
Okay. So before we get into the movie, how are you doing?
I'm tired, but okay. That is pretty much the whole thing with me today and this week so far. Is that I'm tired but fine. And for media to recommend, I would just like to say that I am dog now. Chat Pile released a single.
Oh, okay.
No.
I thought that was a ghost communicating through you.
Sorry, no, that was just my Ray Gun Bush impression. Not a demon. Although I understand how you would conflate the two. No, but Chat Pile released their first single off of their upcoming album Cool World, called I Am Dog Now, and I have literally been listening to it on repeat almost every day since it dropped because I'm fucking obsessed with that song. And what else can I say except I am dog now? Also, Blackwater Holy Light, another band that I like a lot, dropped a new single for their upcoming album. So if you're less of a sludge metal type person and you want to check out some other music that I would have to recommend, go check out Blackwater Holy Light's new single. It's a little bit more in a shoegaze direction rather than doom metal, which is kind of what they had been doing previously. And it kind of forecasts that their upcoming album might be going in a little bit more of like an ethereal, like shoegazy rock direction instead of metal, which I'm totally down for. It sounds great.
Cool.
David, how are you?
I made it to the gym this morning, which is the first time that I've made it to the gym in fuck ever, and it was really good. Of course, I hurt myself because I haven't been to the gym in 2 months, and my wrist hurts. But otherwise, it's good.
But you did it. You did the damn thing.
I did the damn thing.
Nice.
Indeed. And otherwise, I'm feeling good. What I have to recommend is I watched 2 Roger Corman directed Edgar Allan Poe adaptations starring Vincent Price.
Yes.
House of Usher and Mask of the Red Death.
Yes, Mask of the Red Death, which I only know from the samples that Bell Witch uses on Four Phantoms. Right? They use samples from, or not for Phantoms. Sorry,
it's on Longing.
Yeah, it's on Longing. You're right.
But turns out it's a good movie beyond just that part that they sampled.
Yes.
And House of Usher is as well. House of Usher, a blonde Vincent Price without a mustache,
Cursed.
somehow creepier than just normal ass Vincent Price.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed both of those greatly.
Nice.
And I should watch more Corman in general.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to the legend.
I haven't seen a lot of Vincent Price either. I
don't
seen a couple of his movies.
I don't think I've seen him in anything other than these two. I think I had that revelation, like, I haven't seen Vincent Price as an actor. I know about him. I know his voice. I know what a horror icon he is.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually watched any of his movies, so I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
So let's get into the Blair Witch Project.
The Blair Witch Project from 1999, a film that takes place in Burkittsville, which I am sure is not any kind of weird omen about how this podcast will go. I'm sure that this podcast will bear no resemblance to the events of the Blair Witch Project, despite the fact that one of the hosts' last name is Burkitt, and this film takes place in Burkittsville, Maryland. Always a thing that I just think is funny watching this movie, because that's my name. That's me. And it's the name of the town in the,
it's funny
in the movie. Anyway, so the Blair Witch Project. I wanted to do this one for the end of Shaky Cam Summer Camp because, like I said on previous episodes, kind of go big or go home with this. I figure we probably will never be devoting another entire month of this show to found footage films. So we'll probably cover more found footage films because, I'm one of the hosts of this podcast. But this is probably the only time we're going to be like dedicating a theme month to it. So I figured like now's the time to do Blair Witch because it is impossible really to overstate the influence that this movie had on the found footage genre. It's not the first found footage horror film ever made. There are some that predate
like I think most people cite Cannibal Holocaust as the first, and then The Last Broadcast is another important one that came out before the Blair Witch Project, but the Blair Witch Project was filmed first.
Right.
And more importantly, The Last Broadcast sucks.
That movie sucks so fucking bad. It is so boring. It's so boring. I was while I was watching that movie, I was almost impressed by how not entertaining that movie was. I was like, they kind of had to try to make it this boring. It sucks, and it's stupid, and the acting is bad, and the final act twist is the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough about The Last Broadcast, a movie that we're not talking about today. But yeah, a few found footage horror movies existed before the Blair Witch Project. It was sort of a thing that people had already tried. But this movie both defined the genre, defined a subgenre of horror that hadn't really come into its own yet. This was sort of the movie that created the idea of the found footage horror film as like a subgenre of horror movie, as opposed to like Cannibal Holocaust, which is just like a horror movie that uses a device of like, we're just shooting this and like it's the characters holding the camera, right? But like it is the first true kind of like found footage horror film in the way that we know it today, because everything else copied it.
Yeah.
Right? So this is like everything else that we've covered this month owes its entire existence to the fact that the Blair Witch Project was made, and crucially not just was made, but was a massive success.
Yeah, this thing was huge.
Yeah.
And I think I was too young when this came out to
same.
to
I
know
was like
about
6
it.
years old.
The other thing that we should mention is not only this massively important to found footage as a subgenre.
Yep.
It's massively important to horror and massively important to filmmaking as a whole.
Yes.
Because of how innovative it was in terms of its conceit and the way it was filmed and how cheap it was, but also the insanely detailed and well thought out viral marketing campaign before the internet was equipped to handle viral marketing campaigns.
I'm glad that you're mentioning this because I do think it is not. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say all of internet horror, creepypasta, internet horror YouTube channels, like all that stuff. I don't think any of that looks the same without the Blair Witch Project. I think the viral marketing campaign for this movie, which was a sensation, right? The marketing campaign was a sensation before the movie even came out, right? I think that you can draw a line from that directly to all of the movies, major motion pictures that are now being made based on internet creepypasta, because internet creepypasta doesn't exist without that marketing campaign for Blair Witch. Or if it does exist, it exists in a totally different and unrecognizable form, I think. I'm pretty sure, like, the entire landscape of internet-based horror, r/no sleep, like all of that stuff, Slender Man and shit, like all of that, I think has roots in the marketing campaign for this movie. And so I truly think the internet as we know it looks different if this movie doesn't come out and isn't marketed the way that it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree. Even though I'm not as familiar with creepypastas and stuff like that you are.
Yes, I love internet-based horror. I'm a big horror fiction podcast listener, and a lot of that is just taken directly from creepypastas and like Reddit posts and stuff like that. So yeah,
but watching this movie, you can tell, and they released tons of marketing materials, some of which you can still access, like a website and a fictional mockumentary. They've done several fictional mockumentaries on the history of the Blair Witch and Rustin Parr and the murders at Coffin Rock and everything regarding the background of this movie and the disappearance of the characters. And of course, the thing that everyone talks about is like people didn't know if this movie was real or not.
Yes. In a weird way, it is an inheritor of the legacy of possibly the first found footage horror film of all time, Cannibal Holocaust, in that way, where like the filmmakers of Cannibal Holocaust literally went to trial because because people were so convinced that the people in their movie actually were killed. And they had to like present the actors in court and be like, look, they're alive, they're fine. Right? This movie kind of had the same thing where like when it came out, people were freaked the fuck out because they thought that these three people had actually gone missing and been killed and by some kind of supernatural entity or whatever. And part of that, there's a thing that I want to touch on. Part of that is because the filmmakers had the actors sign an agreement basically saying you won't do any press, you won't like say anything about being in this movie. So they had to keep it on the down low and basically like pretend like it didn't exist until after it came out. And then eventually they were like able to do publicity for the movie. Also, they were not compensated very well, the three actors in this film.
I heard they weren't paid at all, and they eventually sued.
They were paid $500 a week.
Okay.
During the making of the film. There is a relatively new article in Variety, which is an interview with the three of them, Heather, Josh, and Mike, who used their real names in the movie. And so there's a new Variety interview that came out really recently that High Priestess Pod read and sent to me knowing we were doing this episode, where they talk about it. So they were paid like $500 a week. And for all three of them, they were basically like, this was a really early paid acting gig for me. I had been doing stuff for free, so I was just excited to be part of something. And they signed this agreement that was basically like, yeah, if I agree that if this movie grosses more than $1 million, like we're entitled to like a fraction, like a tiny fraction of that, right? Because all three of them were like, this movie's not going to make more than $1 million. So they didn't know. They were like inexperienced indie actors who hadn't done any professional work before. And then the movie's this huge sensation, and eventually like the studio, the original production company sold the rights of the Blair Witch Project to Lionsgate. And so from the initial like box office run under the original production company through to like Lionsgate putting out sequels and merchandise and home video and like all this shit.
It's so weird.
It has grossed millions and millions and millions of dollars. Yeah.
It's so weird to me that this is a media franchise.
Yeah. It is weird.
Because I haven't seen the sequel, Book of Shadows, but everyone says that sucks.
Yeah. I kind of want to watch it though because it sounds like it sucks in an interesting way at least.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And then Adam Wingard did a remake, or not a remake, sequel, a direct sequel to this recently.
Didn't see a second of that.
They did a video game.
Yeah.
Jason Blum from Blumhouse says he's got his hands on a full reboot remake.
All right, man.
Which, good luck.
I feel like it's real feast and famine with Jason Blum.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, he's on a good run.
Recently, I think he's been
a little bit famine.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, all right, Blumhouse. Neon's doing it better. Fucking A24 is doing it better. Like Blumhouse is a little bit like, okay, like maybe if there's no other horror coming out, I'll be interested in seeing what they're doing.
even A24 is doing mediocre horror better than Blumhouse right now.
Yeah.
with Maxine.
I like that they kind of have sunk into that lane with their horror stuff. They're like, yeah, sometimes we're doing like the real like prestige-y, like everybody's talking about it, really buzzy horror movies. And then we'll also just throw in some like B shit in there as well, which I was like, very happy to see that they're not being super choosy about like, oh, the project has to be like the next Hereditary. It's like, no, we'll throw out some like dumb shit too.
Yeah, and I forgot. I keep forgetting that. I always forget this. That one of their first horror movies was Tusk.
Yeah. Yes. The Kevin Smith movie in which Justin Long becomes a seal or a walrus. Yes.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, one other thing I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
Because we mentioned Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
I did watch Cannibal Holocaust last week. Another thing that Cannibal Holocaust did was the actors signed an NDA or whatever, or something that prevented them from appearing in other movies for a year to maintain the idea that this all really happened. And I don't think that Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick, the directors of the Blair Witch Project, I don't think that they were influenced by Cannibal Holocaust. It seems like they were influenced by documentaries on, paranormal activities and mysterious disappearances and stuff.
Yeah.
They found those to be scarier than real horror movies.
Yes. And despite the fact that they may not have been influenced by Cannibal Holocaust, they behaved similarly to those filmmakers in terms of shafting their actors. Because in this Variety piece that I was mentioning earlier, the actors talk about how after the movie came out and was a huge sensation, they couldn't get other work. Because like a lot of people thought that they weren't acting in the movie, right? And then also they talked about how the production company would like reprimand them, would like scold them for auditioning for other things, because they were like, nobody's supposed to know that you're even alive, let alone a working actor. So like, how dare you go like audition and try and get more work? And it's like, fuck you, like I'm in a successful movie, I want to like get traction off of that. Just the Variety piece just lays out how these three actors were treated very, very poorly by the original production company, and then even worse by Lionsgate. They ended up getting a $300,000 settlement between the three of them, which after like legal fees and whatever is like a pittance for each of them. It like basically let one of them buy a new car and one of them like pay his rent for a few months, and like that's it. And they've never received anything else. They've basically gotten pennies for this movie. And there's like horrible stories in this Variety article about how like, they couldn't I think it was Josh was saying like he was in line at the grocery store and he like couldn't afford to pay for his groceries while the Blair Witch Project was like cresting the $25 million threshold or some shit. Just like insane, stupid bullshit. Well, I think it's Mike. It's either Mike or Josh in the Variety article says that as the Blair Witch Project was like becoming a sensation, he was waiting tables at an event where his own agent was a guest, which is just like so fucked. And his agent was like, what are you doing here? You're in the biggest movie in America. And he said to his agent, I never really got money for that, right? Like, it's just super shitty how these actors were treated. And I wanted to address it.
Yeah. Because I know that I didn't know tons of the behind the scenes stuff about this. So I'm glad you brought that stuff up.
Yeah.
I know that Josh has acted in several other films. But if you look at Heather Donahue's career and and Mike's career, they kind of just did this.
Yeah.
And they've maybe shown up for interviews here and there.
Yeah, and
but
it kind of wasn't for lack of trying to hear them tell it. Yeah.
Yeah. It really sucks that happened.
Yeah.
And they also, of course, the way that they shot this, a lot of the dialogue was improvised, and part of the process for making this movie was the directors and the crew would just torment them in the woods all night.
Which I think is the main point that I wanted to make by bringing up the variety piece, is it's like, it's especially shitty that they weren't fairly compensated for a movie that was insanely profitable, like one of the most profitable indie movies of all time. It sucks that they weren't fairly compensated for that, especially because this movie is entirely their artistry and their talent.
Yeah.
That's the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, there's no director, there's no cinematographer holding a camera on them. They were trained to operate the cameras, and they're doing it themselves. There was no script. They're improvising their own dialogue, right? It's like they're doing all the work, and they got, like, none of the money.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much plot summary we'll get to in this episode because you know it. It's the Blair Witch Project.
Right. Also, there's not a lot of plot to
They
this
they
movie.
run around the woods and they get scared.
Right.
And then at the end of the movie, that shot that you know happens.
Yes.
Like, so I want to touch down on these performances. All three of these actors are incredible.
Yeah, they're all great.
They're
Yep.
all great. We've talked about Heather Donahue as like being probably the best performance in any found footage movie.
Yeah. Challenged potentially by Adrian Tofay in
Yes,
Be My Cat a
yes.
Film for Anne.
I wanted
but
to-
those are pretty much the two.
I wanted to pose a question to you because I was wondering this while watching it. We talked about the three actresses in Be My Cat standing out to us differently on each watch.
Yeah.
Does that happen to you with the Blair Witch Project? And if so, who stood out to you this time?
It's such a triple hander between the three of them that I almost feel like they don't, like, no one really ever steals the movie for me. That being said, on this watch specifically, I went through a real roller coaster. I feel like I always go through like a roller coaster with how I feel about the characters when I watch this movie, but this time it was very specifically honed in on Mike.
Me too.
Where I was like, at the beginning and middle of the movie, I was like, fuck Mike. Mike sucks. I fucking hate Mike. And then, like, somewhere in the third act, I was like, first of all, I feel like I'm softening on Mike. Second of all, I came to a disturbing realization, which is, oh, Mike's me. That this would be me in this situation.
Yeah.
Except for the kicking the map into the creek, which is stupid and I don't
Yeah.
understand. But I do understand acting out childishly acting out childishly in that way, because you're like frustrated at a situation, you know? So even the map thing, I was like, yeah, sort of see those impulses in myself sometimes where I'm just like, I'm just going to fuck shit up for other people because I'm upset. Right. But towards the end of the movie, I was kind of like, oh man, poor Mike.
Poor Mike. Mike rocks. I'm a big Mike fan.
I really hated him at the beginning of this watch.
Oh, I loved him at the beginning of this
Where I
watch.
was
Where it's
just
like Mike's just here. Mike's just here to have his pretzels and drink his beer.
Yeah.
And get paid for this documentary and go
Yeah.
about his day. And the worst things possible happen to Mike in this movie.
Yeah.
And the performance is, I like Heather does this like downward spiral.
Yeah.
Of trying to maintain the documentary and trying to maintain like we're gonna go on ahead, descending into just profound terror and panic and regret. And,
Yeah.
and of course, you know, we all know that scene where she's holding the camera at her face and it's
Right.
incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Josh has always maybe been the weak one for me.
Oh, I love Josh.
Josh reminds me of just like Josh is kind of like a burnout. Like that's what he reminds me of. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't give a shit.
Yeah. That's what I like about him.
and he's very rude and very mean to Heather.
I feel like Mike is more mean to Heather at the beginning of the movie. Like in the early part of the movie, I feel like Mike is more mean.
Okay.
I think.
But what I like about Mike is just Mike goes through a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah.
Where he's like he's really dejected and kind of is just there, and he just met these two people to like trying to figure out how to get out of this situation, to being like delirious and slap happy, to being genuinely terrified. He's all over the map in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think the real Mike did a great fucking job with this role.
Yes.
And of course they all did a great job, but I was really tapped into Mike this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love all three performances, but I agree. I sort of like was riding the roller coaster with that character this time, and definitely ended up in a very different place than I started the movie on him. But yeah, and I think all three performances are great. I love Josh too. I love that Josh for a lot of the movie is just fucking like over it. He's just like, oh man, like I gotta fucking get this equipment back. I gotta fucking
I gotta go to work tomorrow.
I gotta go to work tomorrow. And at one point he's like, when they're like out there for like one day more than they planned, he's like, okay, so eventually like my girlfriend's gonna realize I'm not home, so like someone will come looking for us. So I like that he's also like just got a girlfriend back home, and he was like, it's fine, babe, I'm gonna go in the woods for a few days on this shoot. It's like, I don't know. I like his whole kind of like slacker burnout vibe. He's the Shaggy of this group, and I kind of appreciate it. Also, I love when he goes missing, because Josh is such a fun name to scream at the top of your lungs 100 times in a row. Which is a decent chunk of the dialogue in this movie is Josh.
I forgot
Josh!
that he goes missing. I'm not relatively early, I would say. Like the last 30 minutes, he's absent from the movie, and we're just looking for Josh.
Yeah,
really.
it's like about a half hour from the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Josh also gives me like school shooter vibes. I don't know why.
I'm not sure why.
I'm not sure why. Do you get it though?
Maybe. I don't know.
I feel like not that this is piggybacking off the school shooter thing. I feel like I've known Joshes in my life, and I hate them. The Mikes that I've known, I've found to be lovable and charming.
Gotcha.
And affable.
I don't know. I feel like I've met my fair share of decent Josh types in my days, but I don't know. Anyway, so yes, that's probably enough on the performances, but all three of them are great.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we can like sort of talk through the movie. Like you said, there's not like a whole lot of plot to cover. Number one, because people already know it, and number two, because like there's not very much plot to this movie. But I do like. So we should talk about the beginning bit, which is before they go into the woods, and they're doing like their documentary interviews, right? And so we get the behind the scenes stuff, and then also the stuff that they're filming that's gonna like be in the documentary. So there's the behind the scenes stuff of them like picking up Mike from they're picking up Mike, right?
Yeah, they pick up Mike because they haven't met Mike before.
Mr. Punctuality. And they go into Burkittsville and my town. I own it, and I'm the mayor. They go in and do interviews with like townies, and these folks were not like actors. They just like gave actual people on the street sort of a rundown of like what the movie was, and then just had them do this stuff like somewhat improv. So they were basically like, hey, well, like we're making a movie about the Blair Witch, like this is what the deal is. Now we're gonna interview you and you just make some shit up about this. And as a result, they feel really authentic and really like grounded and very real, which I enjoy.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the Man on the Street interviews because a mockumentary style found footage movie lives and dies on the strength of its interviews.
Yeah.
And in like watching the last broadcast, there's a couple good ones in there. There's a whole lot of bad ones.
Yeah, sorry, I was just laughing because I was remembering the movie Willow Creek, the Bobcat Goldthwait Bigfoot movie, in which there is an all-time weird ass freak man who's one of their Man on the Street interviews, because for the Man on the Street interviews in that movie, which we're not talking about, they interviewed actual people in this real town in, I think, Oregon, that is entirely based around like Bigfoot tourism. So a lot of people in this town are real weirdos, and they interview this guy who's like a Bigfoot expert, and his eyes during the interview, one of the people is one of the main characters of Willow Creek is a very attractive actress, and so she's one of the ones interviewing him. His eyes are scanning her body in such an uncomfortable and unpleasant way, and he's got such slimy, weird energy. And it's like you can't fabricate it. That was just this guy when they were interviewing him. He was just like undressing this woman with his eyes while talking about Bigfoot. And it's like so unsettling and gets under your skin. And it's like, yeah, they just found an actual freak. Anyway.
I'm also thinking of Hell House LLC. There's the older guy with the ponytail.
Yeah.
In that movie, he rocks.
Yeah.
He's so cool.
Yeah.
All the other interviews in those movies suck, but every time that guy shows up, I'm like, you deserve an Oscar.
You know which mockumentary character I love? Bob Smeat.
Yes, you love Bob Smeat from Lake Mungo. Lake Mungo has
Bob Smeat.
great interviews too.
Yep.
But I think I'm just gonna say it. I think the Blair Witch Project. I think these are the best interviews in any found footage movie.
Some of the best. Yeah. I agree with that.
Because I think all of these people on the street that are not actors are doing a really, really good job.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's plenty of ones that were shit that we're not seeing.
Yeah. But the ones that they chose to include in the film rock.
Yeah, they all feel so authentic and realistic.
Yes. Including the toddler who apparently got the memo that they were in a horror film.
Yeah.
Because this is like very well-known trivia about this movie, but in the interview that they're doing with the woman who has the toddler, she's like telling the story about like the serial killer guy who's part of the Blair Witch legend. The guy who like put the one kid in the corner and made him face the wall while he killed the one kid, and then he took the kid out of the corner and killed him, right? Which we get that story being told in parallel by two different of the interviewees, and they kind of splice them together. But she's one of them. And as she's talking, the toddler like keeps covering her mouth and being like, no, stop. And it's like, they didn't plan that. They didn't tell the kid to do that. The kid just started doing that. And it's like, what a beautiful accident, because it makes that whole moment so creepy. It makes it totally work. And it makes you believe the story more because this kid's reacting that way. And it's like, yeah, that toddler was just doing toddler shit. And it just totally works for the movie. Which is very fun.
If there's a weak performance, I might say it's the is it Mary? What's her face? The older lady who
I disagree.
I don't know. I go back and forth. She seems very affected with her performance, but she just looks. No shade to this lady. She looks like a creepy old bat, and that at least works for this scene where she's talking about the Blair Witch and how the Blair Witch has hair all over her.
I really like her performance.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very good. Like it is broad, but it's like, yeah, this is kind of like a kooky old lady. And I love, oh my God. I love when they're interviewing the one guy about her before we meet her. And He's like, yeah, around here, people kind of think that she's kind of a crazy lady or whatever. And Heather goes, how would you describe her? And he goes, crazy.
That's good.
It's very funny. And also, yeah, when she's talking about the Blair Witch having hair all over her body, like hair all down her arms, and then she could see like the robe was open and she could see the hair all down her body. And she says at one point, you could see that she was a female. So horseousy confirmed. She says she has like horse hair.
Yeah.
So the Blair Witch has a horseocy.
Horseocy?
Yeah, a horseocy.
Or hairy titties.
I wonder if she has 2 boobs or 6 boobs. The Blair Witch.
Oh, I did not think of that. Surprisingly,
because like a horse has 6 boobs, right?
Yeah.
How many boobs does a horse have?
I've never
the greatest
counted
movie
the boobs
podcast
on a horse.
at gmail.com. How many boobs does a horse have? And is that the number of boobs that the Blair Witch has? Anyway. But yeah, so like all these interviews are great. You know who I fucking love in this movie? These 2 dudes who are fishing together who fucking hate each other's guts. These are my favorite guys in this movie. Because there's like this one young guy who, talk about school shooter vibes. This guy has mass shooter vibes. The younger guy.
The younger guy who kind of
with
looks
the
like
glasses.
Dahmer?
Yes.
Yeah.
This guy has mass murderer vibes. This guy has I am a libertarian, ergo I should be able to own a fucking submachine gun vibes. He seems like he is very interested in the military history of ancient Rome, this guy. But he's the one who's like telling the Blair Witch story, and then the older guy is like, "You young people don't know shit, you stupid fuck." I fucking hate your fucking ass, Harold. Can't believe you're still fishing at my fishing hole, you fucking son of a bitch. He just seems so hostile to him, and I'm like, why are these guys hanging out with each other? They seem to hate each other with a passion. It was very amusing to me.
I've been meaning to ask you this, and we can cut this out if we want.
Yeah.
We should go fishing.
Yeah.
I haven't gone fishing in a long time.
I've never been fishing. It would be entirely new to me.
I would do fishing as a wee Cub Scout and Boy Scout
yes.
in Phoenix at like man-made ponds or whatever.
I was never a scout. I was too busy doing Shakespeare.
Yes.
Because that was my summer activity as a child. Because my parents are in the theater.
Yeah. Myself and another member of the cast bonded over the fact that we were both theater people and Boy Scouts over drinks the other night.
Nice.
We should go fishing. Let's go fishing.
All right.
Put some CCR on and some brewskis and go fishing.
You have to get up early for that, though, and I've been rising late lately. I've been sleepy.
I've been sleeping in a lot, too, with having late nights at rehearsal and the play and just general depression. But I woke up at 5:30 this morning and did not have the energy to go back to sleep.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm up now.
How do you not have the energy to go back to sleep?
I
would argue that going to sleep requires the least energy out of everything.
I lie in bed for 20 minutes and I get frustrated about the fact that I'm not falling asleep. And eventually I'm just like, fuck it.
I like, by the way, that in the Man on the Street interviews, they get kind of multiple backstories for the Blair Witch. It's like, it's this supernatural witch with hair all over her body, and it's like, but it's also like the legend is sort of connected to these murders that happened, where the serial killer was like killing a bunch of kids and stuff, and there's all these legends that kind of intertwine and blend together. And the movie never gives you a definitive answer on which ones are true, which ones aren't true, what is actually out there. And that's obviously great, and I love it.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. It's one of the strengths of this movie is that it gives you a lot of creepy ideas, but is ambiguous about them. So your brain just fills in the gaps, which is way scarier than anything that they could script.
Yeah, I watched the pre-release mockumentary that they put out as part of the promotion for this movie called Curse of the Blair Witch, which talks about more of the backstories behind these different legends. And basically, like, kind of the conclusions that they come to are like, the Blair Witch is somehow involved in all of these. Like, she influenced Rustin Parr to kill those children and this and that.
An evil influence that dwells in these woods and makes bad stuff happen.
Yeah. But what I like more than that is the idea that this area is just evil.
Yes.
And also, the New England woods, fucking evil as hell.
Yeah.
I was asking my brother this because I
think technically Maryland, not New England, but yes.
Well, my brother lived in Maryland for a little while.
Oh, okay.
So and he lives in Maine now. So I asked him if the woods in Maine and Maryland were similar, and he said yes. And he talks about how, like, it is just a wall of trees.
Yep.
And during the fall, it's a wall of dead, deciduous trees that are long and creepy and have weird limbs. And you can just get lost in there and really not find your way out with how dense the forest is.
Yeah.
Because this movie and The Witch, directed by Robert Eggers, which I love, are both shot, or at least The Witch is meant to represent New England. I don't know if it was shot there. Can't think of other movies that have depicted the woods as this evil, malevolent force as well as these two movies, and particularly the Blair Witch Project, as we're talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is, like, the strength of this movie. The thing that is so scary about this movie, I legitimately think this is one of the scariest movies anybody has ever made, I think. And the thing that is so effectively scary about this movie is that you never see anything. and the camera is so often pointed at these woods that trick your brain into thinking you're seeing something. And like the first time you watch this movie, but even on rewatches,
I think so.
That is it's so primally frightening. Like there is like monkey brain, like ape brain that activates when these cameras are focused on these dark woods with all of these like twigs and brambles that just look like something off in the distance. There's just it just activates your fight or flight in a way, because it's just like, yeah, it's like primitive pre-civilization man out in the dark woods where there's predators lurking is kind of the feeling that it gives you, you know?
And it helps that the movie was shot on potatoes, so
yes.
the camera is super fuzzy and grainy, and that interacts so well with the foliage and the forest floor,
yes,
and everything that they're pointing the camera at. And to the point of your point about it, like the movie playing tricks on you with what you're looking at. You know, I guess I'm going to bring out the fact that I was a Boy Scout again for some reason. This movie reminds me of that primal fear that I had walking back to my campsite at summer camp in the dark after hearing a scary story about the Native American legend of, basically it's like the Arizona equivalent of the Sasquatch, of the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Hearing that
Mogollon
story,
monster?
Mogollon monster.
Yeah.
Yes. Hearing that story, walking back up to camp and just looking in the woods at night.
Yeah.
And feeling like something's looking back at me because
Yeah.
of the shadows and the lights, and of course other scouts are jumping and scaring the little ones and stuff like that. I'm surprised at how well that movie is able to tap into that fear, even on the third watch for me.
Yeah. I've seen this movie a bunch of times. I've probably seen this movie half a dozen times, and it still works for me.
This was one of the first horror movies that I saw when I decided that I wanted to get into horror movies.
Me too. The High Priestess Pod had actually already seen the Blair Witch Project, and when we first started getting into horror movies, this was one where she was like, I've seen this and you haven't. Since we're going to be watching a lot of horror movies, like, you got to see this one. It's foundational, right? By the way, High Priestess Pod's history with this movie, which she has given me permission to tell on mic, is very fucked up. So, when this movie came out, she was like 6 years old. I think she was like 8, maybe 9 when her parents rented it. And for some reason, her parents let her watch this movie at like 8 or 9, right? So she saw this movie very, very young, like way too young, and was terrified by it. And then her father, my father-in-law of mine, if you are listening to this podcast, apologies for saying that you did something morally wrong, but like, what the hell, man? He built the stick things.
Oh my God.
From the movie and hid them around the house.
I think you may have told me this
because
because I just
hid
remember
them
that.
in like medicine
Oh my
cabinets
God.
and like in her clothes drawer and shit. And it's like just to traumatize his own child, which is insane.
Those stick figures are so fucking scary.
They're really scary. Yeah. They're terrifying. Especially the one, like, one of them looks really big. There's the one that, like, the camera focuses on and then it pans down to, I think, Josh sitting on the ground. And unless it's, like, a real forced perspective thing where that is way closer to the lens than Josh is, it looks like it's, like, almost human-sized, which I don't really think I clock every time I watch this movie, but this time it stuck out to me in a big way. It's the one that's, like, all fuzzy because it looks like it's made of, like, a bunch of sticks instead of just, like, 5 or whatever. And that one was, like, really bugging me out this time. I was like, that's fucking so terrifying that it's, like, gnarly looking and pagan and ancient looking and also huge. It's super creepy.
The rock piles are also kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
They're simple, but they're creepy.
Yeah, I watched the movie and there's a part of me that's like, oh, that's fucking lame. And there's the other part of me that's like, what if I was camping and I woke up in the middle, or woke up the next morning,
and there was a circle of rock piles around your tent?
Yeah.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Is because the way that this movie is filmed, sort of the like found footage, like guerrilla indie filmmaking of it, it's better at putting you in the mindset of the character than a movie that isn't made this way, right? So like, instead of being like, oh, rock piles, that's kind of lame and cheap and whatever, like that's not very scary. Instead, you're like, what the fuck would I do if I woke up and my tent was surrounded by like 8 rock piles that someone had built outside of my tent while I was sleeping in the middle of the night?
I would just assume that they were rock cairns that you kicked over.
Yeah. I do hate non-functional cairns. But yeah, like shit like that it's so simple and so effective in this movie. And it's really, really scary. Anyway, so like the next like major thing that happens in the movie is they've after the man on the street interviews, they've gone into the woods and they go to the graveyard, the old like territorial graveyard. And fucking Josh knocks over some, or is it Mike? One of them knocks over some shit, which is what kind of causes all of the paranormal stuff to start happening. Is one of them like knocks over like a burial marker or some shit. I wanted to call this scene out specifically though because this is the scene where they're talking about the lady who gives them the whole big broad creepy warning.
Yeah.
And Heather says, oh, what did she say about like she's trying to remember something that Mary whatever said, and she's like, fuck, I wasn't listening to her because I thought she was a lunatic. Which is such a funny line.
Justice, I forgot how, and we just watched this couple months ago together. I forgot how fucking funny this movie is.
This movie's hilarious. I love it.
The thing I love about the intro, or the first 20 or so minutes, along with the man in the street interviews, is we just get to hang out with these three, and
the hotel scene where they're all just drinking beers is perfect.
Yeah, it's great.
I love that scene so much.
This does the best job of getting you of a found footage movie that I've seen.
Yeah.
The hangout stuff in this movie and getting you to sympathize with these characters. It does such a good job. It does the best job out of any other found footage movie that I've seen.
It really does.
You get the sense that they're friends. You get the sense that they're passionate about this, and they really don't know what they're in for. And again, the performances are great. But the jokes, and even when shit's going really crazy at the end of the movie, and they're still finding jokes occasionally to break the tension, or even when Mike and Josh are like have fully lost it and they start singing in America the Beautiful, I was laughing.
That is maybe the funniest moment of the movie.
That's when I was like, I'm kind of Mike, because I would definitely break at some point and just start singing loudly, because
that's what I was saying. Like around that point in the movie, I was like, oh, I'm Mike, because I would totally be like, America. You know what else is very funny in this movie? The guy in the man on the street interviews where they're like, do you believe in the Blair Witch? And he's like, nope. Are you a religious man? Yep. That guy made me laugh so hard. He kind of looks like Crazy Ralph from Friday the 13th.
Oh, yeah. Good old Crazy Ralph.
Yeah.
You're all doomed.
He's the opposite of the Crazy Ralph
Burkittsville has a death curse.
Because he's saying he doesn't believe in the Blair Witch. He's just like, nah, you're fine. Nothing out there but woods.
We could get Crazy Ralph in this movie.
For a second, I thought you were going to say we could get Crazy Ralph on this podcast, and I was like, I don't think we could.
I think the actor
dead. Anyway, so the desecration of the burial ground, accidental as it may be, seems to be what kicks off the activity in this movie, because then it's like the thing where they're camping and there's noises from outside the tent. Someone's like banging on the walls. We find the rock stacks around the tent, not in that order, but like all that shit starts happening.
The sound design in this movie is so key to making the atmosphere of this movie feel scary.
Yes.
And like the effect of the grainy footage of the woods, the sound design plays tricks on you.
Yep.
And I started thinking that I was hearing things that I couldn't quite pin down.
And the things that they actually do put in there for you to hear, as far as creepy noises are concerned, are so quiet and so low that, yeah, you can barely hear them. So sometimes you are barely hearing something, but then that makes you listen harder. And like you said, you're just hearing shit that you're not actually hearing. It's pretty genius.
Josh's screaming is great, but more than that, like there are times where I think that I'm hearing laughter and crying, like more in the middle of the movie when they start when they're just like they still think they can make it out of the woods, and they're still trying to make it out of the woods, and they think that they just have to make it back to the car, and someone's fucking with them. The crying and the laughing was so scary.
Yeah. The baby crying is so scary. That's like such an eerie, unsettling sound to hear when you're like lost in the middle of the woods.
and even just the rustling of like the bushes and stuff. Another thing that my brother told me is like he felt like it would be really easy to tell like if a squirrel was chasing him or following him versus a bear, just based on like the sound of the rustling in the brush. And what he learned living in Maryland and Maine is just you can't. It does play tricks on you, and there are times where he would be walking through a wooded area, because he at like home from work or something like that at night, and he would hear rustling in the bushes and not know what it was. So yeah, I think the sound design is so good in this fucking movie. Of course, there's no music, and it does a great job playing tricks on you, playing tricks on the actors and the characters.
Yes, I completely agree. So we get like all the creepy shit that happens. We get like the stick figures and everything that we talked about, and like that whole scene, the weird voodoo shit scene, is so good. I think it's Josh who finds it first, and he like walks into the clearing where there's all those stick men, and he just sounds so over it. He's just like, oh man. Come on.
I love the way the camera
voodoo shit, man.
I love the way the camera pans over all of them slowly. It's so good.
And there's so many of them.
Yeah.
There's so many, which is so scary. It's so much scarier that it's like a ton of them. I also love when, I think it's Mike, is like, oh, fuck, man, I didn't even see that one, man. Like, just finds another one and is like, damn it. Because this is like when they start realizing that they're like really in over their heads. And like, this is like, they've been checking the map. The map says that they should have been back already. And yet they are walking and they haven't found the car yet and all that shit. Mike gets pissed off at the map, fucking kicks it in the creek. That's a whole thing, which is truly the stupidest thing anyone in a found footage movie does.
I mean, if
kicking that map into the creek.
If he hadn't done that, would they have had a chance?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're fucked either way because I think it's supernatural or whatever. But like, just from like a logic, like they don't know that the supernatural forces are manipulating the landscape, so like keep the map. But I also love Josh and Heather's reaction to that. Like that moment of acting between the three of them is just so good. I love Josh like fighting him. Like there's like they physically get violent with each other, and it's great. Also later, after the whole map thing, and like they kind of like things chill out again, but then there's like another moment of tension between Heather and Mike at one point, and he's like don't bite me again, and she's like don't make me bite you again, which is so funny that she's just been chomping on him. when they're like at odds with each other, she's just like, apparently Heather's a biter.
He's the fat one.
Yeah.
So if they resort to cannibalism, he's going down first.
Although we see him shirtless in this movie when they're like talking about his chest hair, and he looks pretty good.
Yeah,
he's
that's
not
true.
actually fat.
He's got the kind of ska kid, guy who's gonna order mozzarella sticks, backwards hat vibe.
Yeah,
he's the fun fat one.
Yeah.
Also, I'm right there with you, Mike, on the inconsistent chest hair. It's a tough life that we live.
Yeah. My chest hair is pretty consistent. However, my back hair is all over the fucking place, man. There's just like patches of it here, patches of it there, no rhyme or reason to it.
Oh, I got nothing. I got nothing.
My back, some of the hair on my back is about as long as my head hair ever got. And it's just in little patches as if it is poorly sown grass. My back is God's joke. that he has played on me, where there's just long, wispy little patches of hair with like deserts in between.
Now that I've shaved my head,
Yeah.
And I do have a beard, and my beard's quite inconsistent. My pubes probably got the most consistent growth on my body.
Yeah, pubes and pits. That's where the hair growth is for both of us. I got a pretty good beard going on, but
You got a solid beard.
Anyway, yeah. So weird shit continues happening. They're hopelessly lost and shit, and eventually they like get up in the middle of the night. For I think maybe like the second time, because there's been like, or second or third time, there's been like the noises. I'm just gonna ignore that ominous thump that we just heard. In
Okay.
addition to
Okay.
just keep going, David. It's fine.
Okay.
David, we have to do this for the art.
I was trying, but I'm getting really scared again.
It's fine. I'm sure we'll make it out of here okay. What was I say? Oh, the ectoplasm. I like the ectoplasm. I like the goop. I like that Josh's stuff gets slimed by blue goop, which we
forget
don't
about-
really get a good look at.
Yeah, we don't get a good look at the goop.
But they
I wanna-
describe it, and I kind of enjoy that they're just like, yeah, there's fucking like blue ectoplasm all over there.
I don't know. I want to see the goop.
Yeah, like, what's that about?
What if this turned into what if it's the blob? The Blair Witch blob crossover?
Dude, can you imagine if it's a blob? How fucked up would that be? If you go out in the woods looking for a Blair Witch, you find the fucking blob?
The
kidding
blob
me?
instead.
You kidding me? You get digested by fucking alien
Oh my god.
ball of jello?
What a good fucking movie. Sorry.
Oh man. That would really ruin your day.
The Blob Witch.
Encountering the blob. The fucking blob? You kidding me? Yeah, I like that his stuff gets goopy. And that their tent gets ransacked. That's also very creepy.
The one scare that maybe doesn't quite work for me in this movie, I don't know, I go back and forth on it.
Yeah.
Is when they're shaking the tent,
Yeah.
or presumably the directors and the crew
Yeah, it's like Eduardo Sanchez out there just like tapping
shaking the tent,
Yeah.
because I think I see that and I realize, oh, there's just two guys outside the tent shaking the tent.
Yeah, but like if you were actually in the woods at night and not part of a movie and it just seemed like there were a couple dudes outside of your tent shaking your tent, that would also be terrifying.
That's true. I will say, being a Boy Scout and camping a lot, and probably being an impressionable young child, you hear weird sounds in the woods at night a lot, and sometimes you see weird shadows through the tent,
Yeah.
and you feel like something's just outside the tent.
Yeah.
Like when I was in Boy Scouts, there were probably no less than 24 times I thought there was a bear outside the tent.
Yeah, yeah. I've gone camping a lot, and sometimes like just like deer or whatever will just be walking around out there while you're asleep, and it is unsettling hearing things walking around outside your tent. Even though like I know intellectually I'm like, oh, it's probably like a deer, it's probably a raccoon or something. It's like, yeah, but like I can't see it, so I don't know what the fuck that is. And I'm pretty vulnerable in here. Yeah, it's like a very primal layer of fear. The one where the ectoplasming happens, because basically what happens is there's noises in the night. They get up and leave the tent and run. They start running because they see something. And then they like wait till morning and go back to the tent, and it's all ransacked and Josh's stuff is gooped. This is the one where Heather screams, "Oh my God, what is that? What the fuck is that?"
Yeah.
This is a very important moment of this movie, because this is illustrative of the fact that this movie's success is partially due to intentionally good filmmaking choices by the creators, and partially a happy accident. Like that like that toddler covering that lady's mouth in the interview. This, oh my God, what is that? What the fuck is that moment is a mistake. Because the makers of this movie, Eduardo Sanchez and his team, right? I don't remember the other director's name.
Daniel Myrick.
Yes.
I might be wrong on the pronunciation of the last name.
Anyway, they had constructed a Blair Witch costume that someone was wearing off in the woods.
I think it was pretty crude. I think it was made out of like pantyhose and stuff like that.
Yes. And it was supposed to be like the hair all over the body, like the Blair Witches described in the interviews earlier. And someone was walking through the woods wearing this thing. And that's what Heather saw. She didn't know she was going to see that because they were doing this guerrilla filmmaking thing where they were like giving the actors kind of spontaneous situations to react to, right? So Heather didn't know she was going to turn her head and see this person in a costume, but she knew she was making a horror movie, so she knew that was somebody in a costume. But her performance of like reacting to it is very believable because the moment was very spontaneous, and she sounds so scared. And the filmmakers assumed that the actors playing the characters in the movie would turn the camera to get a shot of it, and they don't. They don't turn the camera over there so that you can see the witch costume. And so instead, all you get is their reactions, and you don't see anything. And I think this movie is worse if it happened the way the filmmakers had originally intended. I think it's so much better that all you get is Heather's really panicked scream. Like, what the fuck is that? And you, as the viewer, don't get to see what it is. Because it's like, what's in your head is way scarier than whatever they made with those pantyhose, you know? And so I think that that's just like such a big part of this movie is it's like part of it is like really great filmmaking choices, really great performances, a really solid, well put together indie horror movie. And some of it is just like, oh yeah, an accident happened that made the movie better. Mm-hmm. And this movie just feels very lucky in that way.
Yeah, because I think a lot of lesser found footage movies will stoop to showing the thing too early or too much.
Yeah. This movie doesn't show the thing at all.
It doesn't show it at all, and I think that's to the film's benefit as well. And the fact that it wasn't planned that way is so interesting, because now, of course, then the other found footage movies are like, okay, well, we can't show anything because that's the way the Blair Witch did it.
Yeah, Blair Witch didn't show anything, so we don't show anything.
Yeah.
Although most found footage horror movies nowadays that take the Blair Witch approach will be like, we can't show the thing except one time at the very end when we show the thing. Like that's kind of the new twist on that.
Which is also
that most of the filmmakers take now.
It's also the Alien thing and the Jaws thing, right? Yeah. But I agree. I think this would be a worse movie if we saw The Witch. Mm-hmm. That all being said, I kind of want to peek into that alternate reality just to see what it would be like.
Just see what it would be like, yeah.
Yeah. Because it'd be interesting if we don't see the witch, or we do see the witch, sorry, and then the rest of the movie continues as it is, where we don't see anything at all.
Right.
Because I'm wondering if that would be disappointing. I'm wondering if the audience would be like, okay, we saw the thing, and then it never came back.
Right. Yeah. I feel like maybe that is how it would feel. Even if it ended up looking good in that moment, it would be like, yeah, but then they just never did anything with that again. Like, then the rest of the movie was just like the same as the first hour or whatever.
Yeah, and
right.
I think the experience of watching this movie in the dark, looking at this grainy footage and looking through the woods yourself to see what you can find is just a far more entertaining way to experience this movie than having the movie show you the thing,
because then you know what you're looking for.
Yeah,
right.
And I think that is like, you have to be active and engaged with this movie, and you're either going to be or you're not, because there's plenty of people who say this movie's overrated and not scary.
Right.
You just have to get on the movie's level.
Yeah. You have to engage with the movie on its terms.
Yeah.
Anyway. Just wanted to talk about that moment because I think it's so important.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is too. I'm glad you brought it up.
Anyway, and then more creepy shit starts happening where they're lost and they're going in circles, even though they shouldn't be, because they're following the compass in like a constant direction and everything. You've seen the movie. It's the Blair Witch Project.
Blair Witch Project.
The same fucking log.
Creepy shit happens and they wander around for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I do like how disorienting this movie is. You never get a sense of what the woods are like. Yeah. There's a couple landmarks that they point to, the log over the river being one.
But they also cross so many logs over the river that it's like, is it always the same log? It's kind of the thing that starts happening in your brain.
Right. That's the great thing that the movie does with it.
Yeah.
And they start losing track of directions, and they keep I love when they're just like, okay, we're gonna walk in one direction.
Yes, we're just
for a
gonna go
day
south
as long as we can and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it keeps the cycle keeps repeating where they keep getting lost, and each day they try a new direction.
Yes, I also think that this is where Heather starts saying some of the stuff like, it's very hard to get lost in America these days. Like, people don't just go missing in America. Like, she hits that beat multiple times. And this watch specifically, I was like, there's not really anything larger in terms of themes that this movie is trying to convey. But her saying that does sort of make me go, this movie is a folk horror movie, to use kind of a buzzy genre term. It's sort of a folk horror movie in that what most folk horror movies are about, think like The Wicker Man, right, is, or Midsommar, right?
Not the bees! Not the bees!
No, sorry, the other Wicker Man.
Oh.
The good one. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man. But what those movies are about thematically that like makes them folk horror, right? Or I guess like not makes them folk horror, but like a theme that comes up in folk horror a lot, right, is that we as modern civilized people are afraid of and made uncomfortable by the traditions and
Justice.
yeah.
What the fuck was that?
It was a Slack notification, David. It's fine.
What the fuck was that?
It was a Slack notification. My Slack notification is the lady saying hummus. That one wasn't a ghost. It was literally just someone from work trying to contact me off hours, which is actually more terrifying than a demon. I don't know what the fuck that person wants, but they're gonna have to wait. Anyway. Fuck, I lost my. Oh yeah, folk horror. Yeah, the thing that folk horror is reckoning with is basically like we as modern civilized people are afraid and uncomfortable by stuff from our past, from like the pagan pre-civilization history of the planet, and it's like sort of like an order and chaos type dynamic between those two things, and like the chaos of the old times, right, before recorded history when things were wild, is both like enticing but also threatening to us. And I kind of think that because of those lines from Heather in this movie, and also because like they're out in the woods and all that stuff, and they're dealing with like a witch. Okay, that was actually very unsettling because the dog did just bark at nothing and then very slowly walked away out of the room, which doesn't usually happen. That was a little disturbing. David, it's fine. David, pull it together.
Mom, Dad, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have started the podcast.
Many people are saying that.
It's all my fault.
It's fine, David. Snap out of it.
Okay.
Let me finish my point about folk horror.
We're saying
anyway, but like, yeah, I just think that her weaving that stuff in, whether it was improv or not, just kind of adds like a little bit of an extra dimension onto this thing, and that I appreciated this time. I thought it was nice, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of getting the folk horror connection with this thing. Pretty much the next big thing that happens is Josh goes missing, because they go in circles. It's the same fucking log. It's a great moment when Heather they all realize, and Heather like is refusing to admit it to herself that it's the same log for a little bit, and then just breaks down. That's a great moment. And yeah, then Josh goes missing in the night. They're looking for Josh. We get the creepy thing where there's like the bundle of twigs with his fucking flannel tied around it, which Heather doesn't open right away, but when she finally does, it's the only gore that we get in the movie, and it is so unsettling. Like that is like that moment I think accomplishes what the filmmakers were probably hoping that seeing the Blair Witch for one moment in the woods would accomplish. I think this does accomplish it, which is basically like, you don't see anything in this movie. The closest thing that you see to seeing something is a bloody tooth and some hair.
I think that's the confirmation that something supernatural was going on.
Yes.
Because as you know, this movie is actually like really, I think, clever in the fact that for once shit starts happening and once things start falling apart between the group, which happens really early too, which I like. I love that tension starts almost as soon as they get into the woods.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling that they don't entirely all like each other even before they go into the woods.
It like this situation brings up stuff about their pasts that that causes tension with them.
Yeah, and just like personality clashes and stuff.
Yeah. There is that disbelief that you could have of like, well, someone's fucking with them, someone's rattling the tent, someone's leaving these stick figures, and they're just stupid because they lost the map and they're wandering in circles. But the discovery of the tooth is very unsettling, and it does confirm that something fucked up is going on.
Yeah, and this is like pretty much right after Heather and Josh have their big kind of falling out, like tension moment too. So like Heather feels extra bad about it because it's like Josh was fucking being a dick to her like the day before, where he's doing the whole "you're gonna write us a happy ending, Heather," like the fucking "that's your motivation" speech, which is like very tense and very like anxiety inducing, and her breaking down there is like such a good moment from her.
Yeah.
And then this immediately follows that, and you're just like, fuck, like that was the last she will see of him because something horrible has happened to him. Right.
We haven't talked about Heather Donahue. We've talked a lot about Josh and a lot about Mike.
Yeah.
We said that Heather Donahue is one of the best found footage performances ever, if not the best. Every choice she makes in this movie from an acting perspective is the correct choice.
That's right.
When she's doing the documentary stuff at the beginning, all the questions that she's asking to the interviewers and the way she's acting with them is great. When she's doing her dramatic, like, there's secrets etched into the living rock of the cemetery.
Yes.
It's so dramatic and overly affected.
She is very effectively playing like a bad amateur documentarian.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah. And when she's trying to keep the group together, I love that line she straddles between trying to be the level-headed one in the group, because Josh and Mike are both going off the rails, and also trying to get this thing going to fuel her own ego. Like it is her fault.
Yeah.
And it also isn't. Like I think the movie gives you a good perspective on how much she's kind of straddling this line.
I think all three of them share blame in a very interesting way in this movie, because Josh is the one who knocks over the shit in the burial grounds. Heather is the one who's like constantly spurring them on and is like, if we see anything, I want to see it on 16, right? Like that's her whole mentality this entire time, right? And Mike fucking kicks the map into the creek, right? So like all three of them fuck up and are responsible for what happens to them to varying degrees. And I like that the movie kind of has them share the blame in that way.
Yeah, and her performance towards the end of the movie, when shit really starts happening and she is like totally breaking down and reduced to nothing, is so good.
Yeah, which is pretty much like where we are at this point in the movie. Like after Josh goes missing, it's pretty much
it's the Heather and Mike show for a bit, where they're still wandering around but they're just so dejected, and it's like, I love when she's like, maybe how do you feel about East? And Mike's like, I don't fucking, I don't care, fuck you.
This is also where they run out of cigarettes, which I love. I love that they've been hiking 15 miles every day and also just constantly chain smoking cigarettes. Like, man, 1999, what a time. But they run out of cigarettes here, and like that's like weirdly kind of the last straw for both of them, where they just go into full on like catatonic despair. They're like, we don't even have any cigarettes. Well, fuck me, I guess we'll just walk east until we die. Which is great. And yeah, so here is where we have, the great iconic scene of Heather talking to the camera. She's sorry to Josh's mom, she's sorry to Mike's mom, she's sorry to her mom. It's all so good. The moment where she stops and is like, what was that, while she's talking, is so good, and she is so scared so effectively scared, and it makes you, the viewer, so scared, and also really sad for her. It's great. It's famous for a reason. It's incredible. And then we find a spooky house.
Justice!
Yeah?
Justice, something's really happening, I think.
What? Whoa.
I don't know.
What's going on?
I don't know. Something's going on.
Okay.
We gotta get out of here.
All right. Well, we have like 10 minutes of the movie left. They just gotta go into the house.
Justice!
David, I need you with me
Justice,
on this.
I think we need to leave the podcast studio right now.
If we're going to record a podcast on the Blair Witch Project, we're going to do it all the way through to the end. And if we hear any demonic activity in this room, I want to hear it on mono, and I want to hear it on stereo. I want to get it. I want to get high frequency and low frequency, David.
That's why you like this microphone so much.
Yeah.
It's not reality. Are you going to record us a happy ending, Justice?
I'm going to do my best, David. I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
I just need you with me on this.
Okay.
All right? And we're out of cigarettes. So
That's okay. I
we
don't
gotta
smoke.
we gotta finish the recording. So they find a creepy house, and they go in the creepy house because what the fuck else are you gonna do at this point?
Yeah. What else are you going to do at this point, I guess?
Yeah. Other than finish the podcast.
Josh is screaming. They hear Josh is screaming, and it's so good when they're like running through. Well, Mike is going crazy. Mike is running through all the different levels of the house to try to find him, and it sounds like the voice is moving.
Yes.
One other thing that I should comment on about the camera work in this movie and the way it's shot. I love that they have a black and white camera and a color one, and you always know who's holding what camera.
Yep.
It's a good way to visually it breaks up the movie quite a lot too. It's just interesting when they're switching back and forth. But
yeah, really, really genius way of letting you know which character you're following, even though you can't see their face. Yep.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's spooky writing, spooky hands all over the walls of the house.
Very terrifying location. And so, like, at the end of the movie here, I mean, people know what happens.
Yeah.
But, like, Mike goes into the basement, and we don't see what happens to him.
He falls over.
He falls over, the camera falls to the ground.
Yeah, we see the camera fall to the ground.
And Heather is running around the house screaming. She goes into the basement. And she's shooting on the black and white camera, and she pans over into the corner, and it's the greatest and most scary final shot of any horror movie of all time ever. It's so fucking good, this last shot, which, like, I know everybody talks about it, but, like, we're talking about the movie. we might as well add to the heaps of praise for this final shot. They set it up in such a good way, because at the beginning of the movie, with the talking head man on the street interviews, they mention a bunch of different anecdotes about, like, weird shit in the woods, right? And there's a lot of visuals that stick in your mind from what people say. And at the end of the movie, they just pick one and give it to you. And it's the simplest one. It's just Mike is standing in the corner facing away from Heather, like facing into the corner of the room. And immediately your stomach drops, you get chills, you are fucking terrified, because you heard all the shit at the beginning of the movie that set this up, and you didn't expect it to come back. Like, the first time I ever watched this movie, I did not expect this final shot at all. I kind of had expected to see the thing with hair all over its body, right?
But you didn't know about Mike standing in the corner.
I didn't
at all.
I didn't. But the first time I watched this movie, and so it happened, and I was like, "Oh fuck, that's the thing from The Child Killer," right? And it is so scary. And then something hits Heather. She falls over the camera, lands on the ground, and it's just like, and that's the movie. And it ends on such a high note. And then it immediately is just like, and we're done, and we're out of here.
Yeah, how do you make a sequel to that, man?
Yeah,
I don't know how they thought they could do that.
I don't know, but it is a perfect ending. It's a perfect ending.
Yeah, it's a great fucking ending.
Yeah,
I don't have anything really to add to it. I think it's really well done. I love one thing I do love is the way Mike is just running through this house screaming, and Heather is like trying to catch up to him. It's almost like there's a supernatural force beyond just the screaming, pulling him through the house and keeping him like out of her reach until they get close to the basement, and then she kind of like catches up to him.
Yeah.
Sort of. This movie really goes from like 0 to 60 in the last few minutes.
Yeah.
It's reaches a really high intense peak.
Yeah. It just like goes into a fever pitch and then like delivers you that last scary shot.
Yeah.
And then just like boom, we're done.
Yeah.
And it rocks, and it is so scary.
Okay. Speaking, we got to get out of the studio, man.
Okay.
I think something just really, really fucked up is going to happen, and
All right.
I don't want to stay here any longer than we have to.
We-
But I guess we'll finish it because you want to.
Well, David, like it's the conceit of the podcast. We have to say
Okay.
whether this is the greatest movie ever made. That's the whole thing of the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Justice.
Don't bail on me now, man.
All right, I'll do it. Justice is the Blair Witch Project, the greatest movie ever made.
Yes, this is Shaky Cam Summer Camp, a month dedicated to found footage horror movies. I am a huge found footage horror movie fan. What the fuck would I be thinking if I said this was not the greatest movie ever made? It's one of my favorite found footage horror movies, probably tied at this point with Be My Cat, A Film for Anne. Nobody has ever done it better since. This movie executes the whole conceit of the genre better than any of its imitators. It's the greatest movie ever made. It's scary as shit. David, if you can just hold it together for one more minute to tell me if The Blair Witch Project is the greatest movie ever made.
So I have a question before I know this is. I know I want to get out of here, but I did want to ask you this question. Do you think this movie gets scarier for you the more that you watch it, or was like that first watch the scariest watch?
I think weirdly, the second or third watch was the scariest watch, but it hasn't been as scary on subsequent viewings, but I still love it dearly. I think it peaked around 2 or 3 watches for me, because that's when I started, due to my mind already knowing like where the story was going, I was able to focus on more little details of the thing, like stuff in the sound design, and some stuff in the interviews and stuff, and I feel like I just got more out of it and was more immersed second or third watch.
Okay.
But yeah.
So I've been very positive about this movie, and I do feel very positive about this movie. Here's where I have to throw in a bit of a curveball into proceedings here.
Yeah.
I think I missed the boat with this one. I think when I first watched it, when I was just getting into horror, I still thought that horror was beneath me. And while I had seen found footage movies, I didn't necessarily see what the Blair Witch had done that was all that special. And while I did enjoy it, and I did love, the way that it was shot and the way that the woods and the film grain played tricks on you, and I thought the performances were good, I kind of had the movie at arm's length. I was like, it's good, but I don't know that that it has affected me the way that it affected other people. Now that I'm much more of a horror fan, I'm not surprised by the Blair Witch Project. And if I could, I would go back in time and get really, really into horror movies and not watch found footage movies and not learn anything about the Blair Witch Project, and then watch the Blair Witch Project for the first time for this podcast episode. Because then I might say the Blair Witch Project is the greatest movie ever made. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to... That's not the world that I live in. And that's not the experience that I've had. So I think I'm going to have to say no.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's
understandable. That's an understandable take.
This is one that I totally understand why it has the reputation that it does. I understand if people think it's the greatest movie ever made, the greatest horror movie ever made. It is very scary. But I also kind of understand the people who think that it's overrated and overhyped.
This is a thing that I'm glad you're saying, because despite me being such a big fan of this movie and advocating very heavily for this being like one of the scariest films ever made, I agree. I understand the detractors of this movie, and I don't think I would ever in good faith try to argue with someone who held the opinion that the Blair Witch Project is overrated or not that good, because I'm like, yeah, it kind of just comes down to personal preference and taste on this one.
Yeah.
It is such a specific thing that I think is executed so well for me, right? That I'm like, I think it's a masterpiece. But if this style of filmmaking or this type of horror movie doesn't click with you or resonate with you, like, I'm sort of like, yeah, I get it. You know? Like, I kind of don't think that it's a problem for me for people to say that this movie, like, isn't good.
Yeah.
You know? Whereas if someone tried to say that about, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 74, I'd be like, what are you, a fucking idiot?
Yeah.
Right? But with this movie, I'm like, no, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I had a different experience as a movie watcher and had come to horror at a different time in my life and come to this movie at a different time in my life, I would have had that pants shitting experience watching this in the dark. But I don't think I think I've had my scariest experience with this movie, and it is a scary movie. But it doesn't hit for me on that level that a greatest movie ever made, as we have defined it on the show, really does. I just heard another whooshing noise. So thank you guys for watching, listening. Oh my God! Thank you guys for listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
This is the end of Shaky Camp Summer Camp. Next week we're talking about Jurassic Park 3.
Jurassic Park 3, Alan.
Hopefully things calm down by then.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this whole demon situation sorted out. Ghost, whatever's going on here. I'm gonna get a priest in here. We'll get this place
I watched The Phantom Menace. Maybe I need to
fine.
watch Attack of the Clones too.
Yeah. We'll get this whole situation
If George
figured
is still. If George is angry about something.
Wait, actually, speaking of George Lucas, I'm actually getting a call right now. Hold on. Hey, George? Hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. What's up, man? No fucking way. Oh man, I got to tell David about this cuz like he's going to flip. Like he yeah, you got him good, George. You really got him. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I love you too. Bye.
Was that George?
That was George Lucas.
Is he making a sequel to THX 1138?
No. It's actually weirdly, I think, better than that for your current situation.
Okay.
So it turns out he was in my walls when we started doing Shaky Cam Summer Camp. But he's since moved on. He's on vacation in Belize right now. But he put a bunch of speakers in my walls to play creepy little noises as a prank. He just let me know.
Oh God.
Yeah, he just let me know. It's just all a prank, David. Like,
oh my God.
He got us good. We were so freaked out.
Jeez.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this is like not a red herring of any kind, and that there's not going to be anything else scary or weird that happens after this because we figured it out. We got the solution. Not sure how speakers in the walls made you levitate and made your head spin 360 degrees around or turn your voice into a demon voice on our last episode, but I'll call him back later and figure out what was up with all of that. You know, he's a master of special effects, that guy.
You know, you're right.
I'm sure he figured out a way to make all that happen. So turns out it was just George having a little goof.
George.
Yeah.
You old rascal.
All right. So now that we've resolved that, and I'm sure nothing else weird or sinister is going to happen, we can just have like a nice, relaxing little sign-off here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love you so much. Please continue to spread the word about the show. Thanks for joining us for Shaky Cam Summer Camp.
Yes.
And as always, later dipshit.
Oh, God! Oh, God! Oh, God!
So, we've arrived at the conclusion of my investigation. While I can't say that I fully understand what happened to David and Justice, I have some theories. Sorry, I thought I heard something. As I was saying, my theories are... Is that... No, it can't. Oh, God.